Good morning. So now I'm here too. Welcome to this talk called A Quick Introduction to Angular 2. Before we get started, by a show of hands, how many of you have done any Angular 1? Okay, a fair amount of number. How many of you have done Angular or have looked at Angular 2? Quite many. Okay, so you already started. I'm not sure why you really need a quick introduction to Angular 2 if you already started to do that. Hopefully you'll get to see some new things. This Angular 2 is actually newly released a couple of weeks back. It came as a release version. It was in the work for actually over 2 years, because Google announced their intention of coming out with a new framework about 2 years ago. So let's start by a short presentation. My name is Tiberiu Covaci, short Tibi. I'm originally from Romania, moved from Romania in 1996, and ever since I'm actually traveling the world. At the moment, I'm living on Tenerife. It's a very nice island in the Atlantic Ocean, outside of the coast of North Africa. I've been doing programming since 1991, so it's 25 years, a quarter of a century, a lot of development. I know my experience is almost as old as the people doing front-end development today, isn't it? So yeah, I've done a lot of this. I've been a trainer for the past 12 years, and not only trainers. I worked as developer as well, because I really like to keep it real and try to understand exactly what other people have to suffer in order to be able to create those teachable moments. I've been doing conference speaking for the past 7 years. I do a lot of mentoring, everything to .NET and web technologies. If at the beginning was only ASP.NET, I realized at some point that I really need to do more, looking into JavaScript side of things, and then from there doing a lot of different frameworks in order to see how can I improve the work I'm doing. I'm a Microsoft MVP and an ASP Insider. If you are on the, like ASP Insider, it's some kind of a list with people that Microsoft thinks they're specialists, and we are entrusted with their plans and their secrets, and then you can see on that list a lot of discussions about everything but Microsoft technologies, because there are a lot of them out there. I'm a father, I have 2 daughters, and a geek, of course, otherwise I wouldn't be here. If you are on Twitter, you can find me at Tibor19. If you do any tweets today, please use the hashtag GOTOCPH, because then you'll get to see them on the big screen. Whatever you have to say, it will show up for other people. Now, my PowerPoint presentation was not that important. The thing that was on it was this slide. I have actually a little agenda. What we are going to talk about. That's a history lesson. Then we are going to look at the quick start guide. So again, apologies for the people that have already worked with Angular 2, because that might be a little bit of a disappointment, but let's see. Then we are going to talk about the modules, components, services, and some of the out-of-the-box stuff that you can get with Angular 2, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel whenever you start a new project with Angular 2. So, the history lesson. AngularJS is a JavaScript framework. By the hands that you showed me, more than half of the people at least have to know about what Angular is. What Google tried to do is to create a framework. They said, we don't want to be too prescriptive, we don't want to be MVC, we don't want to be MVVM, but what we want to create is a way for you as a developer to augment the HTML. Why? Because the declarative programming, it's much more powerful than the imperative one. And imperative programming was the stuff that we were doing with jQuery. I usually like to do a comparison, when I explain to people the difference between declarative and imperative in a way that they can understand, even if they are non-programmers, goes like this. So, assuming my wife wants me to buy some milk, in an imperative way, she will come to me and said, please go to the hallway, take your shoes, open the door, go downstairs, and then turn to the right, go 200 meters, turn right, go inside the store, pick up the box, and then, do all the steps back until you come back home, and then put the milk in the fridge. while this is okay, it's very prescriptive and you know exactly what you do step by step, sometimes the meaning, the fact that I have to buy milk, it's deep inside the whole, you know, the whole chattering stuff that you get around. In a declarative way, she would have just said something like, go buy milk. You know, the implementation, it's up to me at the end of the day. So few people would do the implementation because, you know, after a while, I'll think I'll be able to optimize all this trip, and I might actually take the elevator because I'm too lazy today. I might actually take the shortcut or whatever, you know, for her still doesn't matter because I end up bringing the milk at home. So that's, in a way, the difference between them. Now, Angular 1 done right can be actually very powerful because when you start creating your own directives in Angular 1, what you get actually, you get new HTML-like elements that show the intent, show what you want to do. Now, there have been a lot of problems. They, you know, like 3 years ago, not 2, 3 years ago, Google realized that the way they started the whole Angular stuff might not be the best suited. You know, it was okay for their own projects, especially when you have the people working on the framework doing the projects as well, because then you know exactly which stuff you want to avoid. But when it got the, you know, the attention that it got today, a lot of people realize, oh my God, it doesn't work. Oh, Angular 1, it's so stupid, it takes so much time, it has not, you know, it has a lot of performance issues, it has a lot of this and a lot of that, and a lot of people were complaining. So they said, okay, what we need to do now is to go back to the design board. We need to understand what we've done wrong and how we should do it, how should we make it better. So the whole project, I would say, started sometimes in January 2014, and it culminated with a big announcement that they've done in September 2014 when they said Angular 1 is dead, long live Angular 2. And then everybody freaked out, including me, and then, you know, I was very, very upset because and I'm still in a way upset because what I said to them then and what I will still say to them now is that, you know, you could have chosen a different name. You know, they tried to pull a Microsoft on us, I would say. You know, they choose a name that was very resounding with the developer community. They said, let's do that again. You know, let's try to replicate whatever we've done so far and then use that name. Well, them being a search company, you know, they should have known that if you go on Google and say, show me something related to Angular, most of the relevant answers would be related to Angular 1, at least for the very first adopters. And that was one of my biggest issues. You know, when I started to work with Angular 2 and I tried to find the problems other people had, where would I find them? Not on Google, that's for sure. And that would have been the platform to go, you know, the place to find it. So it was a lot of trials and error, a lot of fighting the, you know, the lack of documentation and, you know, the way other people are thinking. So that was pretty hard. But then they worked very hard, and they managed to do, by the end of last year, actually, 2015, they managed to come out with the very first beta. That was, I think, in the beginning of December. They had alpha for a while, and then they started to come with betas. And then this year, they start coming out with the release candidates, and they've changed, they kill it a lot. I mean, I've done already 2 workshops, and every single time when I've done a workshop, I had to rewrite the whole stuff because, you know, the changes in between. And I will do a workshop in 2 days, and I will have to rewrite the whole stuff again. Now, this is a release version. Hopefully, it will be, around for a while longer. So the next workshop, I could reuse some of the work. Although, my hopes are not very high when it comes to this one. Anyway, so that's Angular 2. Now, if you are here thinking that, oh, I've done a lot of Angular 1, now I know Angular 2, sorry. You know, my condolences, but that's not what happened. That's not what is going to happen either. They are conceptually, equivalent. They are not really, the same, but the idea behind them is almost the same. Now, they've done other choices. They decided to use TypeScript. So the whole Angular 2 is written in TypeScript, and talk about, the big giants working together. The result is, again, pretty impressive. One of the things that happened, being an ASP insider and being an MVP for Microsoft, I get invited to the Microsoft headquarters once a year. They do a conference where it's, closed door, only Microsoft people and those MVPs. And we have NDAs over NDAs that we are not allowed to talk about any of the stuff that they are showing and so on. And just as a side note, we got to see the ASP.NET Core back in 2013. So we've seen it 3 years ahead everyone else, more or less, because, that was one of the advantages, or it still is one of the advantages of being an MVP by Microsoft. The point being, last year in November, one of the speakers was none other than Brad Green. Brad Green being the program manager from Google that's in charge of Angular 2. So he was inside those closed doors telling us what Google is planning to do with Angular 2 and how they are using TypeScript and so on, which was, again, very impressive. And in a way, it felt like Google was poaching, at the developers in the Microsoft community to adopt and then start being, advocates for their technology as well. I was already working with Angular 1, I was already working with Angular 2, and then, of course, I had to tell him that I don't like the name, and he said, yeah, I know you're not the only one, we had this a lot, but now it's too late, we can't go back and do anything about it. So, this is a very interesting time. Now, being TypeScript, they develop it in TypeScript. Most of the examples are in TypeScript, actually, for this. And the reason they chose TypeScript is because it plays very well with JavaScript. It plays better than JavaScript, I would say, in most of the situations. So, how many of you do not know what TypeScript is? Everybody knows what TypeScript is. Okay, perfect. A superset of JavaScript. It makes life easier. So if you just take a JS file and you rename it to TS, you get exactly an idempotent file. It will be exactly the same on the other side, and it will just work. Now, the advantages of using this is because it compiles at the end of the day into an ES5. Again, versioning, ES5, ES 2016, ES 2017, and so on. So when you get a TS file, it compiles back into an ES5. Or sometimes you might need to compile it into an ES 2015, and then you run a bubble transpiler that takes it from ES 2016 into an ES5. Why all this stuff? Because not all the browsers are born equal. Some of them are more equal than the others, if you may. They don't have the same support for all the stuff, so some of them might need polyfill, some of them might need other things. So there are a lot of things that happened. So my idea, in order to do a quick introduction, of that, to use the quick start guide that Google, it's one of those big, big giants. Sorry, they do the Java thing, not the JavaScript thing. Yeah. Google put together a very good documentation. If you haven't used it so far, please do so. It's actually very good. There are a lot of tidbits there. There are a lot of good documentation. They are explaining a lot of things very well. And it's so happened that I used to work with the guy that's in charge of documentation, actually, and I know him, and he's quite good and passionate about what he's doing. So let me show you what I got. I got the quick start guide. Does everyone see it okay? Is the code okay? Good. So we got the Angular quick start. I just followed the steps. I actually did copy and paste with the normal mistakes when you do copy and paste, and then I've luckily found what was wrong with it before I showed it here. So I copy all the files from Google site, actually from Angular IO site, and then I put them in a project, and then I run npm install as they instructed, and then I run npm start to make sure that everything works, and apparently works. So first of all, npm and package.json, that just tells me what the dependencies are, what do I need in order to be able to run an Angular application. So I need some common stuff. I need a compiler, I need the core stuff, I need the forms, and then the HTTP, and then something that has to do with the browser and the browser dynamic. Now, platform browser and browser dynamic is the way for the Angular team to abstract away the implementations that are necessary in order to work with the DOM or to work with a native application on a mobile device. Then I'm using router, and then upgrade in case that I really want to combine my Angular 1 and Angular 2 projects in one single project. Using some existing some of the existing code in here. Other things that are necessary is Core.js. Core.js is actually the module system necessary in order for us to be able to help the browsers understand what a module is. And again, when we talk about modules, we have two different kind of modules here at play. One is the JavaScript module or the TypeScript module, which is the same, which is a way for me to encapsulate the code and make sure that nothing goes outside the scope of, of that module if I'm not explicit about it. So the point being, when I want to show something outside, a file in JavaScript, you show everything outside the file unless you are not putting it inside a function, which is invoking automatically and use the side effect of running the function. While when you want to do a module in JavaScript or an ES 2015, you just declare it inside the file and then you don't export anything from it. It means that everything is local to that file. So that's one of the modules. And then, of course, we have the notion of Angular modules, which were newly introduced, and then they finally made it to the final cut, so now they are part of the new specification. An Angular module is a way for us, like in Angular 1, actually, to group together stuff that we really need for our applications. So going back to this, I'm using reflect metadata. The reflect metadata it's actually used for the dependency injection. And then some other libraries that are in there by default in case you want to go farther with it and use it. Then we have the index.html. Index.html is as simple as it could get. It says, you know what, this is an Angular quick start. We need some polyfills. Those four lines are necessary in order for me to be able to run this application on several browsers, including IE9. They said modern browsers, but they went back into their word and said, let's use it for IE9 too, because there are quite a lot of people using IE9 out there. And then this is where my application starts. It says, please configure the system.js. System.js would be the one that would be in charge of loading all the modules. And then I start my application by saying system.import app. Now, this would be more or less the ng-app directive you had in Angular 1. This is where my application starts. I don't need to explicitly load any of the Angular stuff. Why? Because my app would do that. My application would do that. So two more things I have here for configuration purposes. One is the tsconfig. This is a configuration file for my TypeScript. Whenever I edit something into a TypeScript file, because I'm running it inside Visual Studio Code, Visual Studio Code knows about it, and then I automatically will use this information to compile the file and create JavaScript files out of my TypeScript files. And then I have a typings.json. Typings.json, it's are DTS files, definition files for my JavaScript libraries. Because JavaScript, normally when you work with JavaScript, you can get a lot of methods, and it doesn't really have the type information. And because of that, when you press dot, you don't get the resharper-like functionality. You don't get all the methods that you might be able to use. You might get some other errors. And then we have the system.js. So this is our very first file. As this should work with ES5 as well, not only with TS files, it uses the immediately invoked function here in the execution, and we are configuring system.js. I say that whenever you see something starting with npm, please use the node module folders. This in production would be changed to my CDN probably, or to something similar, so it knows exactly where to bring the files from. And then I'm doing some mapping. So whenever I'm putting something inside my import section, if you don't know what import sections are, just hold that thought for 2 more minutes, and then I will show you what it is. So in my import section, whenever I start something with app, it will know, oh, so I'll need to look in the folder called app, which it happens to be this folder inside my application. Whenever I see something like npm, I would have to look into the node modules folder and then go, and look for this at Angular core, bundles, core UMD.js, and so on. So all those things are actually part of my configuration of system.js. So I'm just helping my environment to understand how it should work. And then I'm doing stuff like creating different packages. I can say for each and every one of them how to behave. So for instance, if someone wants to use the app package, we'll say the entry point, the main method of that particular package is main.js file. Of course, I don't have any main.js. I have a main.ts file, but when I compile that, it would be transformed into a main.js file. And then I'm saying the default extension is JS. What default extension JS does, it helps me save my keystrokes. And I don't know if you're familiar with Scott Hanselman. He was doing the keynote last night. He always says that people have a limited number of keystrokes, so you should use them wisely, sparsely. So by putting that here, it means that whenever I say in my file that I want to import from something, I don't have to put a .js at the end of every single name out there. So that's why I'm using the default extension. And that's actually all for my application. So going back to index.html, when I say import app, what I'm actually saying, I'm saying go to the app folder and look for the entry point, which was the main TS file. And from there, please start my application. Now, next part here, it's a body. And then I have a tag here called my app. My app is nothing that it's an HTML standard, but what I have instead, I have my application, I have my Angular application defining what my app is. And again, I will show you in a minute where that comes from. So the very first thing we need to define, it's a module. Now, my module, it's a way for me to put stuff together, to create reusable pieces of code. So I create, if I have a feature here, I will put it in a module, and in there I will have all the declarations, all the directives, all the components that I want to create, and so on. Including the imports, meaning if I have dependencies on another module, then that's where I will specify them. Again, if you remember how you've done stuff in Angular 1, whenever you declare a module, you declare the module by name, and then you specify all the dependencies. Now, maybe I was a little bit too quick. Let me go back to the very first line of code. The very first thing I'm saying there, please import ng module from Angular core. What I'm actually saying is that inside the file Angular core, which if we go back to system.config.js, we will see there exactly which file it is. I note that you have a definition of something called ng module. That ng module I will use later here. This one, because it has an at in front of it, it's called a decorator. How many of you are familiar with decorators? Very few. Okay, how many of you are familiar with attributes? Metaprogramming and metadata. Okay, so what I'm saying here, please, into this class, I want you to add extra information. It has nothing to do with the implementation itself. It's ambient information about my class. Nobody cares, at least inside my class, I don't care about the ambience. In theory, I could just take this class and then move it somewhere else and just work with it. But because Angular knows about this particular decorator, it will say, okay, so you want me to use this app module class as a module. Oh, and by the way, you want me inside that class to add all those components, to create a declaration, to do a bootstrapping, to do some importing, maybe some exporting, because I would, some modules might be reused in other applications. So please shove all those inside there and create this, this starting point for my application. Now, inside the declarations, you need to put all the components that you want to use, even inside the module. If you don't have stuff inside that, then Angular will tell you at some point, sorry, but I don't see any import for that particular component or for that particular directive. Are you sure that's what you want to do? Because I don't see it where it comes from. And then I'm using app module and I'm saying, okay, in order for this module to work, I need to import another module called the browser module. This is the one that does all the DOM manipulation and all the stuff where I got my, where it knows about my interpolations and and the data bindings that I want to use inside my application. And then I say, I want you to start from the app component, which app component in its turn, it's a class that has nothing more or less in it. You just have a definition. Another thing that's in there is actually the component decorator. Again, a decorator, we've seen it before, and then it's Angular that it's familiar with it, it knows about it, and it says, oh, so you want this class now to act as a component. So how would you like to use it? Well, if someone inside the HTML that you will parse, so when you start the Angular application, Angular 2 has a compiler, and it goes and parses all the HTML that it finds, and it tries to make sense out of them. So it says, oh, so inside this, you want me to do stuff like, look for a selector. Selector, it's a CSS3 selector. if you worked with, with CSS or with jQuery, that should be very familiar. So whenever you were, where you said dollar, whatever selector you put in the parentheses, that's what you would do here. So what would happen is that when Angular sees this file here, index.html, and it sees my app, it will say, oh, so actually you want me to put whatever, or to invoke that component. Now, that component, if I go back here, it has a template. Template is actually the HTML that I want to use. So if you look at the definitions, actually a template component is nothing more than a directive that has a component. It's a directive that has a template. So if you don't have anything to show, or if you are just behavioral, or you modify or if you're a structural directive, then you don't have to be a component. But a component is everything else. So when you were working with directives, most of the directives you were creating were actually components. Some of them were behavioral, where you would go and maybe add some functionality to existing elements or to your own elements. But most of the time you were just creating components to combine them together. And yeah, because we are in Legoland, to create like a Lego, like a Lego application, or put stuff together in order for them to work. So what I'm saying here is that whenever you see my app, please use this piece of HTML. There is one more thing left here, which I skipped over, which is my main entry point. The main entry point, like in every application, you have void main void, or whatever you want to, you call it in whatever application. Here is the main TS, which is the very first one that I'm importing. And this is a copy and paste thing that you'll always do. The main module inside your application, the Google recommendation is to call it app module. The main component, you should call it app component, and so on. So what I'm saying here is that import the platform browser dynamic. So I want you to do a dynamic compilation of the content of the files, and then I want you to import the app module from the file called app module. If you remember, I told you that my default extension is JS, so I don't have to say app.module.js. I can just say app module, and then everything else is done automatically. I create a platform browser dynamic, and then with this one I would say, please start the application from app module. So that's what we'll do. And then it will go inside my module. It will see the bootstrap component, and it will bootstrap this component, which will say, whenever you see my app, please use that my app, and then replace it with this. So with that being said, I can just go here now and just run this. I would say npm start. What npm start, it runs two things. One, it runs the TypeScript compiler. And then the second stuff that it does, it runs the TypeScript compiler in watch mode, meaning that whatever changes I'm making, it will automatically reflect in here after recompilation. So let me do this. Okay. Where are you? Like this. Like this. So whatever change I make in here, it should be reflected in here. So if I say my second Angular app, it should recompile, and then it should be shown in here. As simple as that. So it makes it much easier for me to actually do development. Of course, I won't do it on one screen. I do it on three because I need a CSS on the other one, and actually Stack Overflow. Let's be honest, on the third one. So yeah, you need to have this in front of you. One other thing I'm doing when I'm doing these kind of things, I do like this, F12, just to have all the information down here so I understand what's happening. I have two errors. Let's see what they are saying, if there is any interesting one here or not in the console. Come on, I think it will tell me that it cannot find style CSS and the icon file. I'm okay with that. I forgot to copy the style file. That's okay. So now we can start working a little bit with our Angular application. So the very first thing I would like to show you, I have this class. Now we can do stuff like data binding. Now, data binding became, in Angular 2, it became one-way data binding. There were a lot of discussions. A lot of people said that Angular got actually scared by Facebook and React, because React does not really use does not really use data binding, or it has one-way data binding. Everything else is event-based. And they said, we want to do something similar, so why not doing that? So I'm creating, let's do something like this. I'm creating a variable. I will call it data, and I'll give it a value of Tibi. And then I want to use this one inside my template. Now, this is a string. ES6 introduced something called a multi-line string, but you do that using the back tick, like this. And then, of course, you can add enters. You can do whatever you want with it. The delete. And this one, perfect. So now I can create actually a multi-line string out of this one and make it easier. How many of you have done React.js? Few, okay? It's actually, I start to like it. I still hate the fact that I have to put HTML with JavaScript. Of course, you'll tell me, no, it's not. It's JSX. I am not sure. I heard all the stories and all the arguments. I've been in this industry for way too long to realize when you have spaghetti code, you are actually asking for trouble. It might work, but I'm not sure. So I always, I always like to actually separate my HTML from my JavaScript. Even when, we used it and we said, you are not allowed to use any JavaScript inside your render function, like you just do the rendering the way it's supposed to be done. And you still get people doing all kind of mixed things, It's been the same, over and over, and I don't know, other people, if they don't learn their history, that's what they end up doing, They think that they can do better than their precursors, and it turns out sometimes they don't. But let's move back here. So I created that, and now this is actually a simple HTML. I would say div, and then, of course, with my div, I would put here the data. So this is my very first data binding. It's a one-way data binding. So it doesn't send anything back. It just looks inside my model, inside my component class, and it finds that I have a variable called data, or actually a field called data. It will take this value, and it will show it in there. So if I'm saving this, it will recompile, and it's supposed to show something in here. Yes, you're right, because this is not a data type. Yeah? Thank you. You see, Stack Overflow would have helped with that. So going back here, now I have this. I'm showing the things, and I can work with it. I can use one-way data binding in a different way. I can bind to different properties. So one of the properties would be styles.color. And then, of course, styles, it's one of the known attributes, and it expects actually a styles object. So whatever stuff I can put in there, like the color, background color, font, and whatever, I can actually put in here as well. And now I need to shove in a value, and the value needs to be a name of a color. I can't put red like this, because if I put red like this, it would actually start looking for a variable called red, and it doesn't find it. I need to put a string red, so I can do like this instead. And save it. So if I put the string red, then it will show Tibi in red. Styles.color, it's red. Can save. Maybe this one died, no? Then why not? Because it's a singular style, like this, sorry. So the style.color, it's red, so then you get it like this. Now, again, this is a one-way data binding. I can do more. I can go in here and take some data, and I would say, you know what, I want to create an input element, and then I would say input type equals text. And then I would say, of course, the value of that text would be the data that we just added. Oh. So now I have Tibi in here. It's exactly the same data. But what I want normally is when I use stuff like input elements, I want the data, whenever I change it, to be able to send it back. So that's one of the things that I'm actually missing now. I don't get the chance to I don't have the, the possibility to get the data. So what I can do is to specify now that I want the data. And the way you do that, you say that whenever someone changes the input, that's an event now. So that's the other way data binding, I will say, the data binding one way to source. So I'm sending data back now. But this is a method. So this is an event. It expects me to send the JavaScript method. So the way this will work would be to either write a method or actually write the code directly. So I could say something like this, dot event, dot target, dot value equals data. So I can save that now. And now whenever I'm changing something, I have a two-way data binding. Now, it's a kind of two-way data binding, and the reason they say that we don't want it to be everywhere is because that was creating a lot of issues with all those digest cycles and all the observing of all the changes inside the input were creating a lot of issues, and then you get a digest cycle that triggers another digest cycle and so on and so on. So they wanted to avoid this, and that's the way they did it. But now it becomes a little bit too cumbersome, and every single time when I want to do something, if I have to do it this way, it feels a little bit too much. So one way to alleviate this problem is to start using to use a different approach. And that different approach is to use something called ng model. Of course, when you use ng model, this being two-way, you need to do it in a little bit different. You need to say that it's both, one way from source and one way to source. And you use something that they call the banana in the box. Why it's called banana in the box? Because it looks like, if you remove this, it looks like a box on the outside and then the banana on the inside, so that's why they call it like this. There is another practical reason for that. Every time, at least at the beginning, you sit and think, so which was the right one inside inside the parentheses, or the parentheses inside the right one. So now when you think about it, it's banana in a box, you know exactly what you have to do. So it's like this. Now, if I just save this and say use ng model, it will tell me, sorry, I have no idea what ng model is. Again, I have the error here. If I look at the error, it's actually quite explicit, another thing. So if you look at the error message now, it makes much more sense. It says something like, I can't bind to ng models since it isn't a known property, meaning that I have something that it's missing. So yeah, this is where I find it. I don't really know exactly what's happening, so maybe you should tell me where ng model comes from. So now what I have to do, I have to go back into my module and say, oh, by the way, we have some dependencies here. So one of the dependencies would be import, come on. It's called the forms module, because now we want to use stuff related to forms input, and then it's from Angular /forms semicolon, and then I would say please import that module. So make this module and its content available to whatever components I have inside my module. So if I'm going back and saving, now we will see that this is back here, and I can do changes and everything will show there. One more thing I can do with that, going to my components. By the way, I can go back here into my Visual Studio Code and change a little bit my preferences. And the way I'll do it, I will say that I want to exclude some of the files. Let me go back here. I think I have it here somewhere. Settings. Then go back here. And what it does, it actually removes my JavaScript files and my JavaScript map files. So let me show you how it looks like. It looks like this. It says whenever you see a .js file, if there is already a TS file with the same name, please remove the JS file. If you see a JS map file, if you see something that's like a JS file already there, please do not show me everything else. So it makes it much easier for me to do that. How much? 10 minutes. Okay, good. So we got that far now. So let's see. If we go back now here, let's take this one. So let's show it in here. let's do this. This is the no. Come on. This is the ready-made. This is the K1. Okay, and then this one in here. So then we have back this one. Okay, so now we have this. One of the things, the data is hard-coded. So I'd like to get the data from a service. So another good thing and another thing that they've done actually very good is to add the dependency injection. So I can say something like create a new file. That would be my app.service.ts. This is a service which is export. Whenever I need something to be visible outside, I need to export. So if you get errors and telling you, okay, you tell me about the app service, but I don't seem to find it, you know that you forgot actually to export the class itself. Export class app service. And then I'm saying, actually no parentheses here, sorry for that. Let me close this app service. And then inside my app service, I have a method called getName. And then, of course, the name would be return from service Tibi. Okay? So we know it comes from the service. And now I can go here into the app component, and inside my app component, I would say import app.service, no, app service, sorry, from app.service, and it's in my current folder, so I can use that, and then it's saved. Nothing changed actually, so it doesn't make any difference. But now I need this one to be part of my application. So I would have to, or to be part of my dependency injection. So I would say providers, and I will add app service as a provider. Oh, okay, app service here. And in order to have that injected, I need to add it inside my constructor. So constructor. And in the constructor, I have an application object, private, actually SVC service object of the type app service. So if you remember reflect metadata that I was showing you as one of the packages, now what it does, it looks here and it says, okay, so now you have a TypeScript file and you want to inject in that one an object of the type app service. So what Angular does, it looks into my providers, because without this provider, it doesn't know exactly what an app service is and how to instantiate it. So it will create an instance of that one. Now, the nice part is that every single child component, so whatever component I'm using now in this component, will use this instance. So all the services are singletons. So if I need to create a second singleton, I know it sounds a little bit, devious, even, because it's not really singleton anymore, I need to specify it at a different level. So if I need a child component to have a different instance of that service, I would need to specify it again inside the providers list. If I don't, then the component will go to its parent, to its parent, to its parent until it reaches the module, and then it will look at all the dependent modules I have as well. So all the imports as well will be taken into the consideration in order to find the information about the service where it is actually injected. So now I want to use this. I would say something like svc.getName. And this one, I will actually say this.data equals this. So one of the mistakes I'm always making, it's forget to put the this, because C# background, tells me that this, it's always the implicit one. TypeScript requires you to do that. So if you'll see an error saying data is not defined, just see if it's not something that you missed. So now it shows from service Tibi. Of course, inside the constructor, you should not do any of those kind of things. You shouldn't call other services. One of the biggest problem we might have here is, when you start calling out to services that are actually asynchronous, or services that take a little bit longer. So one way to do that is to use event hook lifecycle called onInit. So let me do this. I will do an onInit. So my app component, we'll do an implement on init. On init, what on init does, it says, oh, you need to have a method here called ng on init. And then the ng on init method would be automatically invoked, so I can do this inside my ng on init method. The implement on init is actually not really necessary because JavaScript doesn't care about the interfaces, but it's very good for me because then it makes me honest. It makes me not forget to add the ng on init. So if I put it there at the component level, I would know for sure that I have to do that. There are others like on destroy, so on load and so on, so they are predefined which you can use. So again, now it's working. If I want now to call an HTTP service, I can do that. Now, there is one more thing that I need to do with my service, because my service might not live in isolation. Let's assume that this service would like to use now an HTTP service to invoke the data. What I will have to do, I will have to decorate this one with a decorator called injectable. Injectable, again, the name might be misleading because you might think, oh, this means that this one, it's an injectable service. All of them are injectable by default. When you add injectable, you say, oh, actually, I want to be part of dependency injection, and whenever you see a dependency inside this service, go up the stack and find the dependency itself, so include it in there. Let me show you the final, I would say, solution. Yeah. Yes. Just quick, I want to show you the end solution here with the service. I have the app service, and I say I need a dependency on the HTTP service, and because I inject the HTTP service automatically, I can use the HTTP service as a dependency. Without this injectable, I will get an error telling me, sorry, I don't find injectable. 50 minutes, I don't know how good it is to get a good introduction. Hopefully you get enough information, or at least a good tasting menu, so you will go out there and try to use it. If you're really interested, I don't know, if there is an interest on the code, show me the hand and I can put it on my GitHub. Okay, then I'll put that. You will see the routing as well. So it's github.com/tibor19. I would actually add, now I have to give you the presentation, I would add on the last slide the GitHub repo name so you can get it from the presentation. We've talked about some of the stuff. We looked at out-of-the-box stuff like, forms and the ng module. We looked at, not really looked, but there is an HTTP service. One thing you would have to work out is to look at reactive extensions. If you worked a lot with promises, and if you don't want to spend time into the reactive extensions world, just remember one single function. It's called toPromise, and then that will solve, it will bring you back to the promised land, not the observable land. Pun intended. Thank you.
We got a lot of questions, and we only have 2 minutes. So
okay.
You got to be quick. There's one here. Do you recommend migrating existing production Angular 1 to Angular 2?
Migration is a strong word, I don't know. I know Angular tries to sell the story that it's very easy to do the migration. I will tell you from my own experience, like not with Angular, but with other frameworks, in spite of the promises they are making or the observations they are trying to make, it still doesn't work as easy. Go back 10 years and talk with Microsoft, and they will tell you ASP to ASP.NET is like this. Do you know VB? You know VB.NET. They were just using exactly the same marketing trick to keep you on board with their things. If you don't have performance problems, 1.5, it's still, it's a very good version. Try to migrate to 1.5. Stay to it for as long as you can. You can still do development. Google will continue to support it, and they will continue to invest in it and to continue to actually improve it. I'm a consultant, and I will give you the 2 words answer. It depends. Yeah. Look at your things. Yes.
I think we got 30 seconds or something. In what use case do you prefer Angular 2 over React.js?
So quick. Angular 2 is very good for...
Very quick.
Yeah. line of business applications, big enterprise applications is very good. If you have a lot of data that comes from the server, with React, the React actually shines at that. Like, you have a lot of subscriptions that you need to make on the server, and then you need to update only partial sides of the screen. I think React is far more better than Angular at the moment, but they are working. There is a war going on. It's a quiet war. At the moment, again, if you have stuff like Facebook, where you have a stream of data and always updating, you don't want to refresh the whole screen. You don't want to do a lot of components around that needs to be re-rendered. I would use React. So it's the perfect, use case scenario, and they are using it perfectly. While stuff like Gmail, where you have a lot of data that you need to read and you need to update, and you have a lot of independent things that might need to work with each other, Angular 2 might be the answer.
Thank you all for coming, and give him an extra hand.
Thank you.